Hey everyone, I am excited to introduce you to what I feel are the two biggest stars in the breathing world from Australia. Our Australian stars, Angie and Shane Saunders. So nice to have you with us. And I love the theme of your little presentation today, finding the middle way in breathing. Sounds very Buddhist, I love it. And so just a little quick introduction. Angie and Shane formed the Breathing Studio and the Online Breathing Academy. And as I mentioned, they're down under in Australia. And we've been working together, been friends for many years. And I always love it when I have students who end up going further than me. And both Angie and Shane aren't just my students, they're students of life. And they've studied with a lot of people in the breathwork world and developed their own really beautiful approach. And that's what we want to talk about today. So Angie, Shane, thank you for coming here to this beautiful Shift Summit.
Thank you, Dan. It's great to be a part of it. Great to be able to share our sort of like version or perspective of breathing as well.
And very humble, Dan. We did follow in your footsteps,
yes.
And just a different path, I guess. That's all.
Yeah, that's how it goes. Cool. All right. Well, let me just jump in because I got a bunch of questions, and I want to kind of pick and probe you a little bit, but we don't have that much time, so I'll try to get to the sweet quotes, the sweet ones. So first of all, the obvious thing is, tell us more, elaborate somewhat on, what do you mean by achieving the middle path when it comes to breathing practice?
Yeah, I think the middle path is it's an analogy for the balance between what our breathing mechanics do and are, and also what respiration is to breathing as well. And I think that's it's kind of also looked at as what's the art of breathing, and then what is the science of breathing. So these two have a point at which they culminate, and that's what we call the middle path. And if we look at our experience in breathing and everything that we've learned, we've seen that you can wildly swing to the art side, and it has all these amazing things that happens there. But then there's also some things that if you're just in the art side, you forget about, well, what is the actual physiology doing? What's the science? What happens in the respiration when we're breathing? And to get the most out of the art, we want to make sure that we've got this balance in our respiration and our mechanics. And I guess that's really where we hit it off. We really studied and went full on into the art of it and discovered all that we could and all the amazing experiences that brings. But then we're also asking the question about, why do some people not enjoy that side of breathing? Why do some people have negative effects from that side of breathing? And so that's where we really swung back the other side and started looking at the science of, what happens with respiration? How does CO2 and O2, balance in the body? What are the things that drive that? What are the things that cause you to have deficits in those areas?
And the good thing about having two of us is you'll get a little slightly different perspectives on a very similar thing. So how I also look at it in similar perspectives is right now in these times, we seem to be living in extreme times where there's extremists that are far left or far right. And when we look at even our moods and how we are in just like a micro sort of experience, there is all the way from highly reactive and angry and highly emotional. And then there's apathetic. So completely turning off, I don't care. So how I also look at it is by understanding the art and the science that you can actually just bring yourself into balance. Once you've balanced out the respiration or balanced yourself out, you then come to this middle ground where you don't feel highly reactive. You don't feel negative and apathetic, like you just want to give up. You actually get to that point of that sweet spot in the middle that has you be present and enjoy life more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that is. I mean, the art part of it is kind of like the intuitive, just stumbling forward and accidentally triggering things and all that. And then you bring the science in, and you can start to understand what's happening. And when the two come together, wow, that's when you got something. It's that meeting of spirit and science, physics and mysticism, ancient yogis and modern, real-time current technology. And so, and the breath is a perfect place for bringing these two things together: art, science, spirit, mysticism and physics. And it all comes together in the breath, doesn't it?
And I also look at transformational experiences versus the every breath, unconscious breath. So even being able to look at the transformational is so extraordinary and highly necessary, I believe. And also to be able to carry that into the unconscious every breath also makes it the impact for long term and integrating it.
And I also think, Dan, that it brings together more people into the collective, more curiosity around breathing, because you do have a large group of people that are very heavily on the science side of things. They'll argue that, well, if you're doing some kind of transformational breathing, all you're doing is hyperventilating yourself, and all you're doing is this. And it kind of, when you're able to offer this explanation about how the interaction between the mechanics and the respiration happens, and you can find these middle grounds, these points, I've found that a lot of people that were very skeptical about say a long form circular breathing session, suddenly they get it. They get that being able to sit in that zone. Not only does it bring up, a psychological experience or even a spiritual experience for some people that would say that they would never have got that from breathing, but it also allows them to actually experience it without going too far, without, controlling their breathing in a way where they understand that they're not taking the chemical axis off too far, where it drops them into a shock, and we've all probably seen that, where some people have just gone too fast, too hard, too quick into something, and then haven't had a positive experience from it. And we've seen that allowing those people that are a little bit more skeptical to ease into those sessions where you're doing long form circular breathing has really had a profound effect on then the way that they look at it and understand it. So that's also been that's been a big part of how we've seen it.
Because some people love it and some people are like, what the heck just happened? you know this.
Yeah. And, I guess there are a lot of kind of like truisms, in breath work. And the science kind of shatters a lot of that. For example, you tell if you're stressed and anxious, then, take a long, slow breath. And for some people, that actually increases their anxiety. And so you guys have done a lot of studying, I know, with Peter Lichfield and others, where you can you're monitoring the physiology while people are practicing various breathing techniques. And many people who, they read something in a book, oh, if you breathe this way, you're going to produce this. And they think they're causing a certain effect in their system. But when you actually measure physiologically what's happening, they're shocked to find out that this yoga breathing they've been doing isn't really doing what they thought it was doing all along. And so talk about that. Talk about that little piece that I think a lot of people overlook and miss, that like as if, all you have to do is like, okay, breathe slowly. That's it. That's all you have to do. And without having the view of the physiology and the chemistry, that's just a guess whether it's going to help them or not, right?
It is. Well, there is no one size fits all for everyone. And that's why no one method is going to be good for everyone. So the idea is that we all have these little experiences that are our own, the little traumas, mini traumas, big traumas, whatever it is. And our breathing will go into this automatic way to kind of protect ourselves from accessing those memories that are too painful. So therefore, we develop these breathing dysfunctions or survival mechanisms in our breathing patterns. And sometimes it it might serve the physiology, or it might serve the psychology for a while, but long-term deficits will create issues in the body. So that's why we're looking at bringing the mechanics, how you're breathing, and then the psychology, how you react to it, and bringing them into alignment. So there's opportunities for healing there.
Yeah, I think a big part of what we've learned, Dan, is that it's a moving target. You know, like as Angie mentioned, it's not a one size fits all, and it depends on where you start from. So if you aren't able to, I call it triangulation. That in my time in the military, whenever you were navigating somewhere, you always had to have a third point, like a point of reference. And so your breathing behaviors and habits that you have, if you don't know which is a physiological habit, which one's a psychological trigger, and which one is the thing that exacerbates it, then you don't have these 3 points to work from. But once you learn that breathing is a behavior, but it's also a mechanical part, but there's also this respiration part to it, the chemistry of it. Once you've got all the 3 of those points in play, then you can start triangulating, you know, what is the trigger for someone? Is it a psychological trigger that triggers you to breathe in a certain way, which reinforces psychological habits? Is it a habituation process where you feel air hunger during a certain time, so you think that that's the problem, so you need more air, so you start breathing in a more dysfunctional way? So people have lots of questions. And we've found that once you have this third layer, this understanding of breathing as a behavior, then you can start to untangle these dysfunctions that people have in a more effective way. And if we filter that down even further, what we've really learned from this process is that most of the time, not always, but most of the time, it will come down to the natural breathing reflex. So people's ability to allow that transition from exhale to inhale, and where that little small gap happens, right in that little small tiny point is where your CO2 gets regulated. So if most people are just focusing on that, now that doesn't mean that you breathe slower or faster or deeper or any of these things. It's purely just an awareness of this one little small point that will help to kind of like unravel these things. And that's really what we've seen, is if you really focus in on this attentiveness, and it comes down to something that you taught us, something that we've read in many books, and that is breath awareness. Really, this whole concept of breath awareness is not just that you recognize and focus on your breath. It goes a little bit deeper into looking at, how do I allow those transition points in the breath where you're allowing the exhale to go to the inhale naturally? But it's paradoxical, because if you're focusing on it, you're going to be slightly controlling it, but you don't want to be controlling it, because you want to have it happen naturally. So it's this really beautiful dance that once you learn how to do it, and you know, Dan, I think it's a lifetime pursuit. I don't think it's something that you just one day it'll click for you. I think the process is more important than the goal. The process of it is more important than the result. I think it's because you're giving that conscious awareness to that point. So that's kind of, it really culminates, a lot of this work culminates at that point of allowing that, because once that is in place, that reflex, or once you have awareness of it, then your unconscious breathing becomes more balanced, more natural. Your body responds to external pressures from the environment. So when the environment changes, your breathing responds, rather than once your environment changes, you get caught up in the environment, you get pushed around and controlled by what's happening externally.
So it's like putting yourself in a position of being the eye of the storm. You know, I look at our body as the hardware, and our psychology as the software. And sometimes you might need like coding here and there to help, deepen the awareness around how you're breathing, what's happening in your physiology. Is it serving me? Is it not? Is it optimal? If it's not, let's fix that up. And if you react to fixing it up, the software reacts to changes, then, there's the mental processes that you can do to shift your thinking. But if you're having a hard time aligning those, then that's where we do like these clearing of the cache sessions, where they can be like, where what's known in the clinical side of things is like negative practice, where you intentionally put yourself in a state of lowering your CO2 and relaxing into it and allowing the body to naturally reset, breaking the habituation and resetting the process. But it's all about how you react to it.
Yeah, the analogy to that, Dan, is you go to the gym to lift weights because it puts pressure on your muscles so that they get stronger. It's the same with your breathing. You do this negative practice to take your chemical axis off balance so that your body can naturally have it rebound and it knows where the center point is. So it's a hormetic stress.
Just got to trust your body a bit more.
Yeah, so you brought up something really good. I'd like to dig in a little more, in that, breathing as a behavior and serving us in different ways. So I can imagine, for example, if I'm a little child and I'm free and I'm expressive and someone makes me feel shame or guilt, I'm going to suppress my own energy. And in order to do that, I suppress my own breathing. So, for example, if I want to be invisible, I'm going to hold my breath. And so and I don't even have to think about it. My breath is going to help me to be invisible by freezing, by stopping. So it's serving my emotional need. I don't want people to notice me. And now it's not serving my physiological needs. Or if I'm talking right now and I'm using my hands to communicate, I'm using my breath to communicate. And so if someone were to look at my breathing pattern, it would be chaotic. They go, wow, that's very unhealthy. It speeds up, it slows down, it's deep, it's small. But when you see, because the breathing is serving my communication, it may not be serving my physiology because it's serving one way or another. So let's talk a little more about that, because breathing, has psychological behaviors and advantages, emotional and physiological and chemical. So what about that kind of trade-off, let's say, when we're using the breath for one way and maybe by habit, and it's constantly causing a dysfunction on another level. Another part of me is suffering because one part of me is being served and another part of me is suffering. What more can you say about that? Because I think that's really important for people to get.
I'll say this real quick, because this is something that Shane says that sometimes really bothers me, but it's truth. And it's all in your results. If you're happy and the result is good, if you're speaking and you're in your flow, it's great, then there's no need, why change anything? But if you notice that you're unhappy, or you're starting to take that little slump, or you notice that subtle changes in your physiology and your emotions or in your psychology, whichever wherever it is on the graph for you, when it starts to drop, you go, oh, why is that? And that's where the awareness is key. And to go into questioning, this is where we do the work. That some people, it's like Carl Jung said, the answers lie in the cave that you do not wish to enter. So it's like, this is where, we do the work on. We look at breathing as a metaphor. What is it communicating? By bringing that awareness to it, you can then start trying things. Does this work? Does that work? Does this work? Does that work? And what works in one moment won't work in another moment. It's like a child, like we taught them how to sleep, and then the next day they don't know how to sleep, so it's just been working with the energies.
I would take it into the physiology, Dan, with this question. And because if we look at blood pH is the chemical axis is trying to maintain our blood pH, really is what it's doing. It's that fine balance between oxygen and CO2. Now, if you think about that balance between oxygen and CO2 has an effect on our nervous system, which has an effect on our brain, which has an effect on our hormone release, which has an effect on neurotransmitter, which has an effect on, so everything that you can imagine that makes us up chemically and physically, our blood pH is having some kind of interplay with that. So if we have this system where our mind is affecting our nervous system, that's one input, right? That's coming one way. But think about the system the other way. We have the environment affecting our organism, which is then in turn affecting our mind. So we have this loop going around. So the idea that you have a system that is as flexible as possible, right? Because if we think about a system in systems thinking, the most flexible system controls the entire system. That's the whole idea. So if you look in nature, the thing that's most adaptable will survive and evolve. Right? That's how it happens. So when your nervous system has lots of flexibility, lots of range that it can go to, then you're going to handle more things, and therefore you're going to eventually come out on top. So the idea here is that you hone or you train that system where it's doing this interplay between oxygen and CO2. If that balance is working really well, then it doesn't matter how much stress and well, no, I'll take that back. It does matter how much stress and load. You can always break the system, right? Like, there's environmental factors that will do that. But I guess the point here is that the better you train that system to handle load, to have flexibility in it, i.e., the more you do this negative practice, the more you're able to put pressure on that system, the more frequency you have in what different breathing exercises that you do, the better that breathing reflex is, the more that system will handle, and therefore you're going to be calm. And I remember, it makes me think of something interesting that I heard you say one time. If you can't disturb someone's breathing, you can't disturb them. Right. And that's the perfect analogy of I guess of the question that you just asked is how does this all fall in? So behaviors are kept in our mind psychologically. We have beliefs which cause behaviors. So again, if our behaviors are disturbing our breathing, then that's one input, and we come back to that triangulation. So we can find out that that's where we're getting some that's where it's disturbing us. If we look at environmental, so we get stressed in the environment. Maybe we're in a high stress situation. Maybe we're in an accident. Maybe we're in a physically traumatic situation. Okay, that's going to affect in one way, and then you're going to have the interplay between those two things. As Angie mentioned at the start, you're going to have traumas that are then going to get programmed into your breathing. So the more flexibility we have in the system, the better it can absorb all of those issues. So you just end up with a stronger. It's like, again, lifting weights for your nervous system. Let's just say it's like that. It's strengthening.
Well, it's interesting because an example of this is we teach like how to get to meditation and stillness, but we actually don't teach that first. We teach it last. We teach understanding what's happening in the breathing, bringing awareness, trying different negative practices, seeing what's going on in the breathing mechanism. Then we do the physiology, where we bring in movement, and we bring in releasing of tension, bringing awareness to where the tension's held in the body. What is that linked to? And then we get to meditation and stillness, because if your body, exactly what Shane said, if your body's sending red alerts to the mind, how difficult would it be to get to that place of stillness and letting go?
It's a bit of a reverse engineering, going back the other way.
Exactly. Right. Cool. Well, I got another question, but I'm still circling a little bit about this point. That what you're talking about is creating resilience in the system. And that's what's needed in the world right now. Things are changing. We're having to deal with intense, change, rapid change, intensity. How do we navigate these rapid, sudden changes? And if we're not resilient as people, we're going to struggle and suffer. And if our breathing isn't resilient, it can't adjust to my changing states, my changing moods, my changing chemistry. And so if we think we're supposed to breathe in a certain pattern, and we force our breathing to constantly be in this pattern because we read, 6 breaths a minute, that's the best thing, then we're actually not allowing our system to adapt and adjust as it needs to. And so that's a perfect message for our time and for the theme of this summit too, because that's how do we use breathwork to navigate these intense times and rapid changes. And while you're really nailing it, when we can do that within our own relationship to the breath, we find that we're able to function out in the external changes much, much better. So, and I think that brings to this question that you and I, the difference between breathing and respiration. And I love to discern the difference, because it's a really, really important difference between breathing and respiration. So how would you describe, what's the difference between breathing and respiration?
I'll go first. Or you want me to go first?
Okay. So in my mind, I look at it like this. Our body knows what to do. Exactly what you just said. The wisdom of the body knows what to do. We just get in the way. So the body, say for instance, in an anxiety attack, the body's actually trying to normal out the respiration. It is unconsciously doing the breathing to normal out its respiration. But we feel uncomfortable with that. So we stop what it's doing, and then we just want it to go away because it feels uncomfortable. So that's where the psychology gets in the way of the physiology naturally balancing itself out. So if we can, it's like resistance is futile right now. And I think it's the biggest thing that's getting in the way of resilience, because as soon as you release resistance to what the body naturally does and just allow it and observe it and make sure it's safe and giving it the freedom to express what it needs to express, then you get to the other side going like, "Whew, glad I finished that one." And then it may not keep haunting you. It's just that bringing awareness. So breathing is what I consider a mechanical process, and respiration gets affected by how you react to what the breathing is doing. So that's where the dance comes into play.
Yeah, I think you can also be summed up, much like Angie said, Dan, is that the chemistry innervates the nerves for you to actually mechanically breathe. So, but your breathing, the mechanical part, serves the respiration. So it moves that way because it's always ultimately trying to get this balance in the chemical axis, in the blood pH is constantly trying to buffer to get the right amount of CO2 to the right amount of oxygen. I think why that's important is because without the right amount of CO2, you don't get the oxygen delivered to the tissues. So there's two times that the oxygen moves in the blood, right? There's when we breathe in and we exchange from the lungs to the blood, right? That's one time, requires the right amount of CO2 to do that. Then the second time is when it goes from your blood, the oxygen goes from your blood into your tissues. And that also requires CO2 to perform that function. So there are times when you can have lots of oxygen in your blood and no oxygen in the tissues. And this can happen a lot. This is why when some people read their blood saturation, their SpO2 with the little pulse ox on their finger, and they see they've got high saturation, but that may not necessarily mean that oxygen is getting into the tissues. Right. So there's these exchanges that happen. So the important part is understanding that your breathing is the mechanical part, respiration is the chemical part, right? Which portends to that movement of oxygen through, and the breathing mechanics serves the respiration, but there's a loop because the respiration is also what innervates the nerves in your muscles to breathe in a certain way. So you've got this loop going around, and if you get out of time in any one part of that loop, you're going to start causing imbalances. And that's why we're saying about having really good flexibility in that system allows for you to adjust, allows for the system to adjust as it needs to serve the chemistry, to serve the respiration. So that'd be the two main differences in how we look at those two things.
What blew me away was how a simple thought or a trigger can completely throw respiration out. You're breathing, but your respiration is completely blown out. And therefore, chronically you get high tension and then moodiness. And then that's just the start of it.
So respiration is reflexive, let's say. It's like the body breathing itself. And breathing is when we mechanically, when we're doing the breathing. Is that a fair way to describe the difference?
Yeah, well, there's also conscious and unconscious. So
Correct,
the unconscious breathing also may not be serving respiration.
Yeah, I think to define that, Dan, there is also the actual mechanics can be unconscious because it's being innervated by the nerves that are being controlled by the chemistry. So one side, that the respiration doesn't have a conscious component to it. You can't consciously control your respiration, right? In that sense. So it doesn't have an input in that way, but definitely the mechanics is both, because you can take your breathing out of automatic and put it into manual drive and vice versa.
But if you consciously let go into the process of what the body's doing, then unconsciously it'll take care of itself. You just have to consciously let go.
Yes. Yeah. There's multiple layers to that. There's multiple layers to that.
And that's where we look at the results. If the results are in and you're doing, you're happy, go lucky, no problem, no tension, free, then no need to look at anything.
I think it's important, Dan, to mention that because these things are loops, because it's a loop cycle, that there's no beginning or end, or there's no start or finish to that cycle. So
it's not linear.
Much like the issue that you have with breathing and behavior. As we said before, you want 3 points to triangulate. Where is it? Is it a habit caused by a thought you have, or is it a habit caused by a physical dysfunction that you have, right? But you could never tell which one started which. It's only through the process of discovery that you go through and you understand, and then someone understands their own trigger. As soon as your client begins to understand what it may be, it's almost like as if by magic, it starts to untangle itself. People have this realization. I've seen this in the work, and this can involve capnometry or not capnometry, and we'll get to that in a minute. But I think when people can actually see that it's them that's doing the dysfunction in their breathing, they have this aha, this like, oh, I'm causing my panic attacks, right? And then you have the very, very interesting follow-on from that. If it's been serving them in some way, even though it's negative, right? If it's been serving them, sometimes people don't want to let go of their dysfunctions.
Get lots of attention.
Right? Like it's a very interesting, it's a very interesting concept. So that's also, I think that's important to bring into it, that it's a loop
That's
system.
why it's the section of doing the work, and the cave that you do not want to enter has all your answers.
Well, so what I love about you guys, that you guys are always like watching for what's on the cutting edge. What's the next best, what's coming up? What's the next level? What's the next step? And I know in your own life, you guys are so successful financially, and what a beautiful family you have, and you're managing to do what other people, they probably wonder, how do they do that? They run all these businesses. They got these 2 high octane kids that are full time, plus they got their own personal relationship, plus they're teaching. How the heck do you do all this stuff? And so you guys are great walking, talking examples of people who have found this way to really bring balance and integration in their life. And at the same time, always looking for that next little edge, that advantage. And so based on your studies of the art of breathing and all the transformational methods and the scientific, and you've done a lot of that measuring and monitoring, how does that come together into what would you say are some of the best practices at the moment? What's at the top of your list in, let's say, current best practices, if you wanted to share the latest kind of understanding that kind of brings it all together? Talk about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we kind of mentioned it before. There's 2 really, if I was to kind of like distill it all down to 2 things. One would be understanding the natural breathing reflex, which in and of itself is really a deeper awareness of breath awareness itself. So it's understanding that little gap that I spoke about in the breath, where you're transitioning from exhale to inhale, where you have that small natural pause. So for example, using a triangle shape in your breathing and just being really observant in that pause part of it. You know, understanding, when are you letting go? When are you still controlling? Are you taking the next breath, or are you just allowing it to happen? And a meditation on that for, you know, whether it's 3 minutes, whether it's 5 minutes, or whether it's 10 minutes is, you know, I would say that it's equivalent to, you know, running a marathon. It's the kind of experience you would get from doing something that's really arduous. It's a highly, you know, it takes a lot of concentration, and it takes a lot of deepening your awareness to look for those subtleties in your breathing. So that's one. So it's sitting in the pause at the bottom of the triangle in the breath. So if you imagine drawing the breath in, letting it out, and then just being super observant in that pause. That's one. The next one that I would say that we've really narrowed it down to, Dan, is what we mentioned before as a negative practice. Doing circular breathing in such a way that it takes your chemical axis off balance. So you start to feel, you know, you feel the tingling, you feel the lightheadedness, you feel, you know, you have the experiences where you start to leave your body. This is another really important part of it, because it's flexing the breathing mechanism. It's taking it right out to the edges and understanding, when do I get that shift? When does that shift start to happen? So if you understand when that shift happens in your physiology, then when you're not conscious about your breathing, you're going to start to feel those shifts. So if you feel like you're starting to get triggered, if you feel like you're starting to get emotional, you're starting to get angry, you not only will you recognize the mood and the emotion, but you'll recognize where your breathing is actually starting to go. And as we know, you can't do much about the emotions. you're gonna have them. You know,
You just gotta wrangle them.
You're gonna have them. But what you can intervene in is the breathing. You can intervene in your breathing, which follows closely, if not right with it. So having an awareness and understanding through those two practices, you're kind of covering the gamut of conscious and unconscious, training both to have an awareness around both.
So in actual practice, you're suggesting that people, you know, you breathe in, breathe out, and then make that pause sort of a comfort zone, right? So just sort of, you know, make use of that pause, wake up, relax, sense, feel. So you're really suggesting that people really start to dive deeper into that. You mentioned the triangle breath: inhale, exhale, pause. So that first suggestion is, in terms of a practice, what people can start to play with is getting comfortable with that pause, is turning that pause into a moment of meditation. How would you understand it or describe, if I want to, how do I explore this point and allow that little reset to kind of happen in that moment? Is that it? It's a moment of meditation? Are we lingering in that pause to really drop into it? How would you talk about that?
All of those, Dan. It's playing. It's really playing in that space as you described it. Because if you're pausing and holding it for a while in there, you're gonna start to understand your habituations to CO2. You're gonna start to feel the really deep-seated fear of death as well in that pause, because you're going to experience the air hunger at a point at which you probably will have this realization. Many people that I've worked with have the realization that small amount of panic that they feel is what they feel on a large scale when they're not thinking about it. So you're habituating yourself to these different sensations that are in that pause. So you pause for a long time, you pause for a short time, you completely let go and allow the next breath to come in. You know, it's a as much as it is a physical process, it's a very mental process as well, because you're observing your own mind in that pause. You're observing, you know, do I take the breath? Do I not? Is my body going to do it, or do I have to get involved in it? Right? Like, did I take it early, or did I just allow it? What happens if I just let it go? So there's a lot that you can do in that space, but it is just that. It's getting into that space and becoming hyper aware of what's going on in that space. What are the physical sensations you feel in that space? right? Do you start to sense physical pain? How do you relate that pain to the panic, to the thoughts that you have? What thoughts are you having when you're just allowing it? So there's many different things, but really to sum it up, it is getting into that space. And after a while, you mentioned meditation. This is something that I've heard from a lot of clients. A lot of people gradually become more comfortable with doing nothing in that space. And then eventually it clicks and they're like, oh, this is what meditation feels like, right? And it's not something that I think that you can describe to someone. I think it's an experience they have to have so that they can describe it to themselves.
So that's really beautiful. It's about mindfulness. It's about meditation. It's about relaxation. It's becoming more conscious and listening into the body during that pause, right? And the other point you said, the other like current best practice is dealing with this negative training. So how do you, give me an example? I mean, negative training. Give me some negative training.
Well, the example of negative training goes to that, if you've heard the term hormetic stress before, right? A hormetic stress is where you put a pressure on the body or on the system, and the system has a reaction to that stress. And that's how we strengthen against the system. So, a good analogy to that is getting sick with a cold. Like if you get a flu and you don't take any pharmaceutical intervention, what will happen is your body reacts to the virus or the flu, and it becomes stronger. And that's how you build up immunity. So this negative practice is like building immunity in your breathing system. So you basically start to feel, where are the boundaries? So instead of you having a very, very small threshold for, say, for example, if you get a fright or a startle, or you go into a panic attack, you'll have a very, very small threshold at which that panic attack consumes you and takes you over. With negative practice, what you're doing, Dan, is you're opening up that threshold. So you've got more flexibility in the system. So when a panic attack ensues, you've got more time to actually let it pass, calm down, let the thoughts pass and calm down. You'll handle it better. You'll handle stressful situations better, because you won't fly off into a fight or flight situation. Your body will naturally adjust itself because it has a broader threshold. So the negative practice is kind of like you're putting yourself into those panicked feelings so that you can sit in it and go, actually, this is not that bad. You're getting comfortable with being uncomfortable in your breathing. And that's really, I guess, the essence of it. And
that like you asked, what specifically it is, that circular breathing. It is throwing your chemical access off intentionally, way off. And it also, the second one is around pausing, like what we just mentioned before about the triangle, pausing, letting that go, like extending it for longer periods, like for making that time and the gap longer and longer and longer, and relaxing into that.
Yeah, really about discomfort, Dan. Doesn't have to be, we used circular breathing as an example. It's the main example, but as Angie just mentioned, it's anything that you do in your breathing that causes discomfort. If you can get used to the discomfort, you'll naturally be able to handle discomfort. And look at it this way: if you're inviting discomfort in the first thing in the morning, right? Like if you're just inviting some discomfort, then your day goes better. Your day is a lot easier because you've already brought yourself. Yeah,
before you've even gone out the front door.
So you're talking about we're breathing in a way to deliberately kind of disturb our system to catch when we fall into dysfunctional behaviors related to that. So to catch where we go off when we're stressed, that kind of thing. So you volunteer for stress to find where your weak points are. Yeah.
Yes.
And it also builds strength in your system by doing that. Right. So not only are you habituating to it, but you're also building up a tolerance, you're building up strength to it as well.
And it's a good it is a great meditative. It's a practice where you're deepening awareness around your body and your mind and what's going on for you. Because I know that there's times where I do circular breathing and it's a breeze. It is easy. But then there are other times when I do circular breathing and I'm all like twisted and tangled. And I'm like, all right, I know that I was way off and I've not been resting, appropriately. I've been trying to burn the candles at both ends. And that's how, we are able to do, you mentioned, how are you guys able to have like a great, amazing family and still run businesses and take them to school and homeschool and la, la, la. Well, it's because we know when we're starting to go out of whack. And it's usually when we start getting reactive to our family members, or when we just can't tolerate stress, we know that we have let it go a little bit too far. And it's time to bring it back in and clear the cache, or, whatever we need to do to express whatever unsaid emotions we need to, or, whatever it is that the mind body system needs to do.
Yeah. And it builds it really, that negative practice, Dan, it builds resilience in the system. And you're recognizing, so it's a recognition tool and a strengthening tool for resilience. That's really how it works.
So you're really talking about learning to become mindful of our breathing, of our reactions, of our responses, to give us to hack our way into being able to heal ourselves of our own dysfunction. And that carries over, then now you can start to heal other people. So how does this all come together for people who are interested in healing themselves and healing other people? What can they take away? What can they look into? How do you translate what we've learned into practices for healing ourselves and healing other people?
Well, I think the first step is taking responsibility for yourself. And I think that's a big first step that most people are fear to take. And it's taking responsibility that your body's maybe not great, or, it's had some traumas and you not effectively process them. And now's the time to do it, because if you wait 20 years from now, it's a whole lot harder. So it's about being responsible for your own self behaviors and physiology. I think the next step from there is, once you feel like you've mastered that, then you can begin to be the example for others, and then you can help them. The hardest thing is when you skip that first step and go straight to helping others, because it's easy. But the holding the energy and holding the space for other people, there is this thing that some people can't quite put their finger on. But it's like, back in the days when you would have an overweight fitness trainer, something's missing, So it's like having a look at taking responsibility for yourself, healing what you need to heal, such that you can hold space for others to do it. And it can just start with your family.
I think on a practical level, Dan, there's no substitute for time on the mat.
Yeah.
Yourself, there's no substitute for you going through these practices, experiencing where your edges are, understanding that you are building resilience, understanding that you are having a deeper awareness and relationship with your own breathing. And even further on a practical level, I think for anybody in breathing and breath work, and understand any healing modality at all, right? Any healing modality at all, people would do well, whether you're a psychologist, whether you're a chiropractor, whether you're a doctor, whether you're a dentist, you would do well to understand the difference between breathing and respiration, and understand how both of those things affect behavior. Because just with a little bit of knowledge in that, just with the tiniest little knowledge of how CO2 and O2 interact, how to then use some of these practices that we described, you will change the trajectory of your clients' outcome. Like it will be that small little catalyst that has someone have an aha moment about their own body, about their own conditions, that you can't give them, that no one can give them. Only a person can have that aha moment themselves, because your breathing is self-initiated and self-maintained. It's not something that you as a practitioner are going to be able to bestow upon someone. You can guide them. You can guide them along the way. And that's what we're saying, is having the practice allows you then to guide other people through it. And then once people have that experience, there's an awakening that happens for them. And I think it was in our work with Peter, one thing really stuck out to me. There was a really famous psychologist, Herb Fine. I think I'm going to get his name wrong, but I'll find out his name. But the quote that he said was that nobody in a psychological setting, from doctor patient, no one should prescribe anything without checking someone's breathing first. Right. And it was such a profound statement that he said, if people have got hyperventilation syndrome involved in it, he said, then whatever pharmaceuticals you prescribe them will probably have little to no effect. And I thought, really, that's a huge statement to make, that your breathing can override, the treatments that you get. But when you start to understand how intricately the CO2 and O2 play in your blood pH and how it affects everything in the body, you get it, that it doesn't matter what chemicals you're introducing into the body. If that balance is not right, self-initiated, self-maintained by you, then you're only going to get, you're going to get less than half a result from anything.
I'll pull another quote from Shane. He says, it's not in the words, it's in the practice. Because that's where you do the work to deepen the intuition of your own healing and the healing for others.
So when you're actually coaching people, what are you watching for? What are you paying attention to? What are you drawing the other person's attention to? What are you looking for as you're coaching a person's breath?
Yeah, the one of the really I guess important parts is tension in the body. That will be the first. That will be the first part, because relaxation is that skill. There's a skill of relaxation, and it's so interesting to if you are working with someone and you begin to work with their breathing, immediately their breathing changes, right? We've all had this experience as, someone starts breathing in a certain way. As soon as you mention their breathing, well, they're creating tension in their body because they're not just allowing themselves to relax. So, the process of getting them to relax first, there's a physical process of relaxation, and then there's the mental process of relaxation as well. So, actually talking someone through relaxation is part of it, and then describing the physical part, like describing how you should have your shoulders, how your jaw affects diaphragm, neck, shoulders, hands, whether they're open or closed. So relaxation is a huge part that I look for in the first instance. The next part that we take someone through is then just getting them to recognize the transition points in their breathing. So when they go from inhale to exhale or exhale to inhale, at those 2 points, is it like a smooth baton change? Is it like, remember when you were at school and you ran the relay race and the baton change was always smoother when one was kind of going and then it got passed over, instead of this, the baton got dropped or it's clunky or anything like that. So getting people to recognize that they want a smooth transition at those points in their breathing is the second part. From there, that's when you'll get deeper into then understanding what's driving them psychologically. So you go through some questionnaires and you'll go through that sort of thing. But I always deal with the physiology first before I go to the I guess the mental and emotional aspects of it, because it's easier for you to actually see if someone is highly tense and they don't have smooth transitions in their breathing. Then immediately you're going into questioning about how they feel when they breathe or anything like that. You kind of haven't given them a baseline first of being relaxed, having smooth transitions in their breathing. That's me personally. That's kind of one of the things that I've learned.
I would definitely say that, those that have an unconscious rejection of their body, it's really hard to do the psychology work with them. So when you can get into your body and do the work with connecting your body, the body is an expression of the unconscious mind, and the unconscious mind has a tendency to run the show. So, if you can bring unconsciousness and consciousness to alignment, which is the body and the thinking, then you have something that you can work with.
Mm. And I can tell, I mean, you have to have experienced this stuff to sort of sense it and feel it in the other person. So we're back to doing our own work.
Yes.
And that's what makes us a better coach. Yeah.
Yeah, because then you can see if someone's breathing in their chest and it might serve them, but then you see that something triggers it and you go, let's talk about that. Let's work through that. And then we can get them back into their belly, but feel relaxed and feel confident about being there. So, what is it? And, so I think most people, the problem I think these days is most people just do physiology or just do psychology or do them separately. And this is what I love about the breathing, because you're doing both at the same time, which creates more rapid change in an easier way.
I think also, Dan, you just mentioned it before, doing the practice helps you to be more relaxed, which gives you a better bedside manner in dealing with people, and dealing with people. You have a greater capacity for compassion and for empathy when you're tuned in. And all of these things, the practice, that's really what it gives you. It gives you that self-knowledge so that you feel confident. And really, if in the healing realm, I think one of the things that I've really seen in the healing realm is the healing really comes from the confidence that is exuded by the person that you're with. If that person that you're with is calm, they're confident, they're sure of themselves, then the transmission of not only information, but also just the energy that you have between you is the thing that really initiates the healing.
Holding space.
And so when you're practiced within yourself, you're just going to get better results with your clients, and they're going to feel it too.
Cool. Wow, this is really cool. I think you're really onto something, because breathing is a mind-body practice. And when you do it consciously as a mind-body practice, you're going to unpack the benefits. So I really love that. How do people find you? How do people find you if they want to learn more from you, if they want to take up something you got happening? Tell us how to find you.
So you can find us at breatheme.com. And there, that's where the breathing studio is. And that's where we run weekly sessions there. We're also, like, as you mentioned, doing a lot of work with Peter Litchfield with the Online Breathing Academy. So if there's people who want to do the work on understanding more of the art and the science together, it's a really nice balance of that within our breathing science course that we're doing in the Online Breathing Academy. So I'd say you can find us in both places.
So are you using a capnometer when you're working with people? Are you measuring CO2 while you're practicing, or what?
Not in that particular one, in that course. We are actually just about ready to, what we wanted to do is we wanted to see how we could do it without the tech first. How could we intuitively do it? Because it's a whole lot easier to learn that first and then go for the tech. So we're starting the tech early next year, actually in January. But in that breathing science course that we're doing, we're showing people how it works. And if that's something that they want to integrate, they can.
Yeah, that course, Dan, is a step down from the certificate course that the Professional School of Behavioral Science runs, where you learn capnometry in it of itself. And we saw that there was just that little gap with it, where there's that stepping stone, because the capnometry can be quite technical. And I think, and we saw that there was a really broad market and also interest in getting dipping your toe in the water and understanding these things, and then getting interested in going on and using the technology for it. But I'm always a big advocate of not using technology first. I love that people could do self-discovery and find it in that way, and then progress to refining it with the technology.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So yeah, find your way and then get it confirmed with the technology, right? Yeah. Beautiful. Well, this has been great. I mean, you guys have such a unique approach, and I think it's really, really important, especially if you already do a lot of breath work. It's always interesting to come at it from a different angle and see if you don't come with some new insights. So You got any final messages for people? Any final words? Anything you want to leave people with before we wrap it up?
I would say that the energy and effort that you put into your breathing and bringing deeper awareness to that will pay you back in fourfold. So if you just trust in the process and stick with it, then you'll start to see some amazing things. And I mean, for us, 5 years down the road, we're still practicing all kinds of different things and bringing some stuff that we, out from 5 years ago that we're, still using to this day.
I think, Dan, whether you're really into the art or really into the science, I think having that little bit of both really serves you in the greater whole. And I think that, whatever corner of breathwork you come from, it always does well to go and learn from another corner of breathwork. It serves you so well to go and experience all of these things, because then it creates a far better, well-rounded practitioner, coach, all of that. So I think it's just that's an important point.
That makes perfect sense, because when I was in China and I was reading the studies on traditional medicine versus modern medicine, and I was in China in 1985, people have a choice. You can go to a modern medical hospital or you can go to a traditional medical practitioner. And what they found was that when you do both, you get better results than either one. And that's why I think you're onto something, because if you follow your intuition and you look at the breath as an art, you're going to uncover a lot of beautiful stuff. But if you're disciplined and you really honor the science and you bring that piece in, you're going to unpack something that one or the other couldn't do. You can only do with both. And so I love that you found that out, and that's what you're moving forward with. Really beautiful. Now, I can't thank you guys enough. And I know people got a lot out of this, and I hope they want to dig deeper with you. So, hey, everybody, was this cool or what? So Angie, Shane from Australia, thank you for being on the other side of the world and coming and joining me here. I'm sitting in Mexico. And, the breath connects us all. Doesn't matter how far away we are physically. And you guys always feel close to me. As soon as I take a few breaths, and you kind of come alive in my consciousness. So I want to thank you for being out there and doing this work, and for being the leading breath workers in Australia. Congratulations, and thank you for sharing your work with us today.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks.
Thank you, Dan. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
And thank you, everybody, for listening in. Onward and upward. We're all set. Ciao for now.